Sort of thinking about Bob's work and trying to kind of contextualize it a little bit and think about what some of the precedents are in comics history. And you know, this kind of thing of cartoonists using, emulating, appropriating, even parodying other cartoonists' visual styles really has deep roots, and some of them are pretty funky. I was kind of thinking about it, and it really goes back. There are precedents going back to the very, very beginning of American newspaper comics for all sorts of very arcane reasons. For example, one of the characters who's routinely sort of referred to as the first popular cartoon character of the newspaper page is the Yellow Kid, originated by R.F. Buckholt. And you know, through a series of maneuvers and shenanigans that are not worth explicating in total detail right now, you end up with these situations where the artist leaves one newspaper, goes to another newspaper, continues drawing the same character under a different title, and then the originating newspaper just hires another artist to continue working in that artist, in the original artist's style. So that at the end of the 19th century and very beginning of the 20th century, you have two Yellow Kids. You have the original artist, Buckholt, drawing the Yellow Kid under the title McFadden's Flats. In one newspaper, you have another artist, George Looks, drawing the same character, approximating the original style in another paper. You have the same thing happening with the Katzenjammer Kids, where the originator, Rudolph Dirks, takes his characters to another newspaper, continues under the name The Captain and the Kids, and then another artist named Harold Nair continues drawing the Katzenjammer Kids in Rudolph Dirks' style. This is all very arcane knowledge, but the point is that there are these very, very deep historical precedents of cartoonists appropriating other cartoonists' styles.
And these strips would run at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not like one would stop and then someone would take over, which happens today, but they would literally be working with the same characters for different newspapers.
Yeah, it's really odd because some of the sort of minutia of trademark and copyright laws related to comics hadn't really been sorted out at the time. But one thing that you see here with these kinds of examples is that there's a lot of craft, certainly. You have two different artists drawing work that's approximately the same, both artists with approximately equivalent levels of craft. So they're bringing a lot of craft into it, but there's no commentary. When Harold Nair, for example, takes over the Katzenjammer Kids, he's not drawing them to satirize them or parody them or appropriate them in some kind of intellectual way. There's no commentary, there's just competition. So craft in the service of competition. If you want commentary, the earliest examples that I can think of are basically porn. I think some of you...
Where everything begins.
Yeah, I mean, anytime something's really popular in the culture, it gets satirized and often turned into pornography, and sometimes both at the same time. There will be some brief cartoon nudity here.
So look closely.
Yeah. By the 1930s, you have these little booklets appearing called Tijuana Bibles. That was a kind of colloquial name for them. They weren't actually from Tijuana. They were usually American. This example happens to be British. Reportedly financed by the mob, often distributed through the same channels as like alcohol. But what you see that's interesting is these appropriations of cartoon characters in a kind of satirical sort of cheesecake, or not necessarily cheesecake, pornographic context. And this one's funny because you have Popeye interacting with the character from another comic strip, Polly from Polly and her Pals, doing the kinds of things that people do. Similarly, there are literally hundreds of these. Little Orphan Annie and the Snooper. This is more typical of the Tijuana Bible format. And she's snooping and she catches Daddy Warbucks and his friend doing things that people do. I am not showing you the last panel. You can look it up. Anyway, but what's interesting here is that, obviously these are crude. These were real cut-rate illustration jobs for people people, really at the bottom of the illustration ladder. And yet there is something, some kind of commentary, some sort of satire, in the sense that, it's always subversive on some level to show media figures doing things that they're not allowed to be shown to do in the media. So in this case, you certainly have commentary, but you don't have craft. If you want craft and commentary together in this sort of context of parody and appropriation, you should really look no further than other cartoonists.